Thank you, Andy. Hi, my name is Paul Fratellone. I'm Director of Software Products at TESCO. My experience over the last 30 some odd years has been basically in software, in systems implementation. I've worked for companies like IBM, Chase Manhattan Bank, Aventis Pharmaceutical. And speaking of pharmaceuticals, that's why I'm not here in person today, because I have my COVID shot and one cannot cancel that. So we appreciate your time in attending this session. And as a follow-up, any questions that you have, please put them into the chat. And then afterwards, I will record another session answering all your questions. So with that said, everybody hears, and big news today, and has been the case for probably 10, 15 years, about analytics and business intelligence and how companies across the various domains need to take a hard look at trying to implement business intelligence, adopting analytics. And the main reasons are cost reduction, reliability, and your customer engagement. And it truly is going to have the benefits that you want. And it's going to take some investment. It's going to take up people. It's going to take focus from the entire organization to actually make this happen. Because what we're looking for is meaningful insights and making intelligent decisions on changes that need to impact those goals of cost reduction, reliability, and customer engagement. Next slide, please. So, as I said, there's going to be significant investment in analytics. And it's going to be a lot of effort, not only in the part of your IT department, but your business subject matter experts, the people that are actually in the meter shop and field operations. This is not just an IT project, although truly sourced from that because we are talking technology, but you're going to need representation from a lot of your teams in order to bring this together. Next slide. So with that being said, when you think about, what kind of analytics are out there, I usually put them into three categories. There's predictive analytics, there is utilization analytics, and third one would be power quality, demand load analytics. There are many systems out there that will plug and play your data. There are enterprise-wide systems, and not only your SAPs, your Oracle, your Maximos, your big players there, but you also have your meter manufacturing companies that have their platform that has an analytics engine. And again, it's going to be a very detailed request for information or request for a quote, but I go in from information first and start to figure out what makes sense for the data you currently have and where those data sets reside. And most likely that they're going to be in different sources, different formats. You're going to have things coming from an CIS system that could be a legacy system, in addition to those who actually have ERP systems. So your data and where it's coming from needs to be thought out. And as your analytics prowess grows, you're going to be looking for additional data sets coming from outside entities. You control all your internal data, but data coming from storms and weather and GPS, those data sets, as you progress in your capabilities of using analytics, will start to take hold. And on top of this, you actually have system integrators that actually have a line of business just for implementing business analytics. And don't forget about your niche software providers. They actually will provide some financial relief compared to some of the larger organizations. And not only that, from a financial perspective, but they're really focused on the tool itself and making it very user friendly. Whereas a lot of the larger companies, you're going to have to do some, jumping through hoops to get it the way you want it, where a small software vendor will be more accommodating to that. And then you got your integrators like Ernst & Young and Deloitte and KPMG. So when you start to think about all the things that are out there of your choices, start to create a scorecard of what's important to you. And it's not only going to be cost, but ease of use, operability, what's kind of the slicing and dicing that you can be enabled. We'll call it ad hoc analytics, if you will, that is enabled in that tool. Take your time with putting out a request for information and really do your homework on the net. I mean, if you can, pull up business analytics software, you'll get a couple 100,000 hits. Even if you put it in quotes, you're going to get a couple 100,000 hits. Next slide, please. So what do you need to do? I talked briefly about the kind of people you're going to need. It's going to be key to making sure you have not only cross-functional team, but there's got to be stakeholders that are willing to take part in the change management and the transparency of information and the promotion of the strategy that your team is going to undertake. And this is where it gets into, making the right decisions. Start out small. Start out with, you can start out small with what you want to focus on, whether it be a cost reduction or customer engagement. But start out small. Don't let your first step into business intelligence analytics be the biggest problem you want to solve. You want to gain momentum. You want to show there's value in doing things in small increments. And from an IT standpoint, this project is most likely going to be aligned in an agile iterative delivery method. I would move away from a traditional waterfall because you want to do this in small increments. You want to be able to show value and keep that momentum going. And I think agile project in this case is really the only way you should be looking at it. And you're going to have to hire. You're going to have to hire outside resources, data, they call them data scientists, if you will, whether they're full-time or contract work that you're going to get through an integrating company. But those are going to be the people that are going to have to come to bear on your project. And also take in mind that your organization might have siloed information, and the information might not be usable in the new world of a usable data set. There might have to be some effort in data cleansing, data quality, and manipulation to get it into a format that is going to be usable in this data structure. There are companies that do that kind of work. Do your homework, get it out there, get your needs out there, and start having your your vendors presentations. I recommend that you have your staff assigned to this as a full-time, and if you're not going to be able to make that their full-time project, then state what there needs to be their allocation. Most projects fail because of the allocation that staff has to it, because most people have a production job. And in that production job will always come first. Be aware of those constraints that the employees that are going to be on your project are going to have to deal with. And lastly, the successes and the failures, the transparency needs to come through. And as you then promote the good and the bad, when it comes to the bad, make sure you understand what was the problems, and then how did you mitigate them and continue to move forward. This is going to be a very large undertaking. Even though you're starting small, it's going to take effort from many people across your organization, and keeping that lines of communication open and transparent is only going to help out the end result. Next slide, please. Okay. So when you look at this slide, naturally the lowest corner, the bottom left-hand corner called reporting, is where most people start out. They look at their data, they have it in some query database, they'll do some analysis and reports. And then as you move up towards the right, all the right top corner, you're talking about real-time analytics, learning, machine learning, where they're actually ahead of truly predictive. They're beyond predictive. It's almost in real time. And as you grow and mature, you might be looking at a little more data complexity, and we're going to stay on the same horizontal, but we're just going to move one square over where we're just looking at our basic data and making decisions. Now, there's plenty data that every utility has, whether it's outage management, whether it's complaints, whether it's unscheduled maintenance, those kind of data sets you already have in your possession, and you can begin to use some analytics, if you will, on what some of the root causes. But if you don't have the deep data, like a reason code as to why a complaint came in, and then what was the triage that actually happened, now you have gaps. And that's why your meter shop people and your field operations people will be instrumental in filling those gaps. And this is going to be a progress over time. You're not going to go from the left bottom corner to the right top corner. It's going to take some time. It's going to take a lot of learning, a lot of mistakes that you'll won't repeat after you make them the first time. But as you grow and start to use more data and start to figure out, besides, start to mix between a cost reduction focus to a predictive focus. And that's going to happen over time. And the journey is going to, like I said, take some time. Next slide, please. All right. So let's look at a typical example here. Like we said, you want to be more predictive. You want to have more operation performance. And in this case, I'm just using an example of an outage. And in the current top view, you can see we know when it started, we know when it ended. But as you're able to add more data into the process and more breakpoints as to where the handoff or the work changes, now you can actually have more insight as to what were the steps involved and then how long did those individual steps take. And at that point, when you're talking about efficiency, optimization, cost reduction, now you could see where we have those opportunities to actually increase performance. So that's the middle view. And then the last view, you're looking at true GPS data of what happened with the people involved in identification and actually handling or getting to the place, working on it, dispatching another crew because there was, more work that needed to be done or more complex work after someone, got there and assessed the situation. So now you have more details to the process, and now you can articulate where your biggest waste is or where you can shorten that curve. And in this case, when it comes to outage management, your customer engagement kind of goal is met as well, because people, expect the lights to come on all the time, regardless of a storm or not. Next slide, please. So let's look at some of the things you can do as far as this is what we want to increase revenue, decrease effort, uh, rolling fewer trucks for emergencies. What's causing emergencies? If there's a storm, okay, well, but failure before it's deemed to be a normal failure for a piece of equipment, that can require an emergency. And now if you have analytics out there as to what caused the transformer to fail, and when we look across the entire network, what's some of the trends or things that happen across all those transformers that could be a root cause. And as you now start to look at your emergency driven data, that's a goal for you guys to start concentrating on in order to roll fewer trucks. You want to do long-term planning So this way, you know what's going to be your current load, what's going to be your current demand, and this way you could size your lines, size your infrastructure accordingly. What you're going to be able to do is get those data points that enables the team to make meaningful and actionable decisions. You might want to concentrate on the loss of oversized current transformers. There's going to be a whole list, and that's how it's going to start as to what are you going to tackle first. And that's going to depend on what's going to give us good value to the business, what's not going to be too much for us to chew out of the gate, and of course, control your investment. And all those three need to be thought of as you're moving forward. Next slide, please. So when we start to think about examples, so this cube analysis that I have here is you're getting your data from your asset management system, CIS system, wherever it is, and you already have your date of purchases and what was processed in your AQLs. And when you start to look at that data, just that purchases and AQL pass or fail rate, what were some of the reasons why these things failed? And if your current system did not record what was those root causes, now you're going to have to, like I said, do some data cleanup, talk to your subject matter experts, find out what they know. And I bet if you go into any meter shop today and ask any of the meter testers, meter techs, what was the worst, and I'll call it mechanical for now, what was the worst mechanical meter that you have experienced? And I can guarantee you they can go through each manufacturer and give their worst easily, right out of it, right off the cuff. And that's the kind of instantaneous data that needs to be captured in your system. That historical knowledge of what went on and why, and they'll know that as well, for that piece, that device to actually fail. So when you look at your RMAs and you look at what's failing in your AQLs, was it an accuracy? Was it functional? And in the world of AMI, it's mostly about functional. You'll have wrong firmware versions, wrong program IDs, switches not working, soft switches not being set properly. Those kind of things is something that maybe you take back to your manufacturer and say, looking at our shipments, this is what we're seeing as a trend, a pattern. This is where we have a gap in expected quality from your organization. You can use that data to your advantage in many ways. You can ask for credits, ask for rebates, lower the price. There's a lot of things that this data can help you manage your manufacturer better. And I'm almost sure in the end, you're not going to be the only one if, particular scenarios happened. I've seen across most companies that accuracy with smart meters is not really the issue. It's more from a functional side, but have the data to prove that. So we take the next level. You have your field shop and your work orders, and excuse me, as that data comes in and as complaints come in and as failures come in, what were those model configuration, firmware, program IDs that had the most amount of failures? And now you start getting in more data sets as to, well, it was this specific configuration and matched with this firmware ID. And there's multiple versions of firmware out there. You could have, up to 6 components having firmware. Now, when you start to doing those combinations of the firmware and the operating system software, there could be some problem that was not found early on. Maybe it happens in the field. This is all, hypothetical. But as you can now slice and dice your data from a model configuration standpoint or whatever attribute you want to add into that, now you could see what's the cost of a field service tech of truck roll. That's part then of the goal you want to reduce. Maybe it's tampering. That might be a reason too. And of course, how are you going to, solve that problem? Separate discussion. But if it's a failure of the equipment, that just happen to die when you put these components together, now you have a identifiable root cause that can mitigate, that can be mitigated, and you might not want to buy that model configuration anymore. And having the data to prove that, or why you need to spend more or spend differently to get you your goals of continuous delivery of electricity, that's definitely gonna help out. And of course, on customer engagement. So now let's take the third level and add in the weather and the storm data and the area outages and what happened during seasons, and if there were any power surges, the number of calls. Now you start to get all this data and now start to intersect it and do your slicing and dicing to say, well, we've had a high failure rate of this model configuration, and it was basically in one county. And now start overlaying the outage period and the length, and if there were storms. Now you can actually paint a big, better picture, more clear picture is, well, maybe it wasn't just a model configuration. Maybe these that we're trying to look at, a large portion of them, all had power surges in the area, all went through power outages, when the flickers on and off, on and off, on and off. Maybe that was one of the causes. But without the data, you're just in a sea with one oar. And with the right information, with the right data that you can get from that information, you can now figure out root causes, corrections, and be the biggest thing is to be ahead of what will happen. And that's that predictive look at things. If on average a certain combination of device will fail based upon historical data in 10 years, now you're going to be out there at year 9 or earlier. And think about not only the machinery, but now you have batteries. Every AMI device out there has a battery, and batteries last X number of years. You want to have your analytics kind of in tune with not only the battery, but the device itself. Because now you got two things that could actually fail. So when you're looking at your analytics, trying to figure out predictive when things are going to fail, well, the battery might not fail and the device might fail, or vice versa. Well, you're going to want to do them together instead of having to roll two trucks. You do it once, and you do it early enough to satisfy both. Next slide, please. So we're looking at making sure that your customers are knowledgeable about how they use energy, where they can actually be better consumers, have a less carbon footprint. The customers of today are extremely focused than what they were years ago. I remember, you get your bill, you look at it, okay, fine. There weren't the tools there to figure out when am I using my energy and how can I manage the use of my energy better. And that's going to make happy consumers. And there was actually a company called An Educated Consumer is Our Best Customer. And that was many years ago, Sims. It was a clothing store. But truth to that you educate your consumer, let them be more in control of the cost that they are going to incur. That's going to lead to better disputes and settlements because you can show and educate the consumer that yes, they use this amount and here's the duration and here's how we calculated it. There's going to be better communication and better responsiveness from your consumers. And of course, when you improve outage detection and restoration, everybody's happy and, singing kumbaya. But miss on having power turned on in a timely manner, and yeah, they forget all the goodness that happened previously. It's only most recent. So take a look across your organization. Look at the data that you have available today. Take a hard look at what you want to accomplish that's actually going to give you enough momentum to increase the spend and the time and the effort. I would actually even approach this from a proof of concept. There'll be a lot of companies, especially the smaller ones, that will not hesitate to do a proof of concept. It might cost a tad and might cost, some money, but it's not going to cost a full blown investment. And this way it can give you the proof and the justification in your business case to want to then do the full investment. So that's another way in which you can get off the ground, small chunk, focused on something that you know is going to raise some eyebrows, get your management team aware to say, there's the value, we see it, the data is proving that we can do a better job, and that then is going to allow you to then grow this project from a proof of concept into a full-blown production team that is always going to be changing. It's not a one and done. That previous slide with the quadrants trying to get up to the right top corner, it's an education. It's going to learning experience. It's going to take not only effort on the part of the company, but it's going to take continued investment as you grow, as that tool becomes more user. You might, think about it, could be a site license user, could be an enterprise license with, unlimited users. Be aware of those constraints. And then, of course, the reporting of that data, whether you're going to have a dashboard for management to look at on a daily basis or just shoot out alerts as they happen. There's going to be a lot of ways for you to communicate the end result of what analytics is going to show you. I think we're done at this slide. Yes. So thank you very much for your time. I would like to remind you to submit your questions, and we will have a separate session recorded to answer any questions that are asked. So I thank you very much for your time. And again, I apologize for not being there in person, but we'll have another go at this. So thank you very much. Andy, back to you.